Michael, thank you for joining us in the commentary booth here. As Daniel was just saying, you were the natural choice for the keynote about economies in transition. We really enjoyed your panel. Both the panel and the keynote.
Yeah.
But a couple of points from that. I remember that you talked about the road from the skeptic to the maximalist, and then there was a new one that was the believer line. Can you give us a little bit more detail on that and how you came up with that thought process?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the stages of orange pilling, and you have an intellectual view of Bitcoin. You either reject it as a nothing, or you accept it, but you're skeptical it'll ever succeed, or you can live with it or not. You haven't quite committed. Or you've decided it's a good technology. Or finally, you've decided it's an ethical imperative. It's better than a good technology. It's a technology so important that the human condition will be bettered by it. So that is the intellectual ladder, which is skeptic, denier to skeptic to trader to, investor to maximalist. But I also was thinking about the degree to which people commit their lives to it, right? So some people that you could have an opinion as an ethical imperative, but then occasionally say that, but do nothing.
Walk the walk, talk the talks.
Right? I mean, like I can have an opinion that, planes are cool, but there's a big difference between having an opinion that planes are cool and they work and deciding I'm going to be a pilot, or deciding I'm going to dedicate my life to aircraft research. So the spiritual hierarchy really is, you start with the observer. A person that observes Bitcoin perhaps is an ethical imperative or observes it as digital technology. And then you go to participant. Okay, I'm not going to observe anymore. I'm going to invest. The 1%er, And, and the 1%er is the person that'll put, 1% of their portfolio, and they'll tell you Bitcoin is great and it's digital gold, and that's why I'm buying 1%, right? More than an observer. But you can't really say you've finished, right? Then you kind of go to the believer, right? And at the believer level, you start to think, well, if it's real, I'm going to invest 10, 20%, something, 30, 40%, but a decent amount of my income, and I'm going to be enthusiastic about it. But there's, as we know, right, we've got people that are beyond believers. They're the people that sell your shares.
Yeah.
Right? They're the maximalist, not in the sense that I'm saying Bitcoin is an instrument of economic empowerment. You can say it intellectually. Maximalist in the sense that every time I buy anything, I ask the question, how many Bitcoin did I have to give up in order to buy that? I'm not going to get the sports car because that's 2 Bitcoin more than getting a used car, right? So when you get to that level, you're an adherent, right? You're pretty much going 80% of your net worth into Bitcoin, and you're debating with yourself whether or not you actually want to do anything other than Bitcoin, right? And that's like a level 4 spiritual commitment, and then the level 5 advocate, right, is just that adherent. But you've decided it's not enough that I'm going to max out my commitment to Bitcoin. I'm also going to go tell all my friends, all my family, all my coworkers. I'm going to go talk to the world. I'm going to actually I'm going to turn my story into a book. Maybe you're going to write the book. I'm going to turn my story into a documentary, and I'm just going to keep talking about it, right? And so clearly that second scale, right, is the skin in the game scale, right? It's it's how much skin do you have in the game. And the first scale is something which you can easily test just by asking people. And of course, I think now about a two-dimensional XY quadrant. I'm like, are you 1-1? Are you down here and you're kind of an observer in denial? That's the person that's heard about it and thinks it's tulips, right? Or are you at the top of the quadrant where you're a maximalist who's an advocate, right? And when we think about orange pilling someone or educating them, we're really trying to get to click them up, from the lower left all the way to the top right. And not everyone's going to get to the top right. But, I'm not really satisfied to think I would convince someone, get them to fill out a questionnaire saying, yeah, it's an instrument of economic empowerment, but it's too risky for me to buy, right? Right. You're a maximalist observer, right? You could have that, right? And of course, on the other hand, it's not so likely that you'll get an advocate that's not somewhere up on the intellectual scale. It's kind of hard to. But I thought it was a helpful model, and it's interesting because the question of the day is, how are we going to educate the masses everywhere in the world? What tools do we need? How much time will it take? What will the steps be?
So the natural follow-up question here that I can think of is, so where are you on that scale? And when are you selling the yacht and buying a sailboat?
I consider myself to be the maximalist advocate.
All right. Yeah.
He's got the laser eyes.
Yes, you're aiming for another 1% also, which is the 1% of the supply, I guess. Well, you said something very interesting yesterday that caught my attention, and it was this way of viewing fiat money as being poisoned, and therefore the entirety of human history almost is like tainted by this poison that has been in the monetary system all the time. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I think that if you look at any population and you give them toxic food or you give them bad water, if you look at
Florida,
I think water is fine in Florida. I live in Florida. I have no complaints. But I think that if you look throughout human history and you read the histories, it's very common to see people dying in their 30s and their 20s and their 40s and their 50s. And and why are they dying? They're dying because they walked past a swamp and they were bit by a mosquito and it killed them.
Yeah.
Right? And, malaria isn't toxic today. We have a treatment for it. Or they died because they had to go visit someone. They didn't have a car and they caught a cold or pneumonia and it killed them. And today we would have an antibiotic and you wouldn't die from it. Or they died because they ate something with sugar in it. The incidence of gout is extreme among the wealthy in the Middle Ages. Like half of every notable individual had gout by the time they were 40. So there are these incidents, and how do you get it, right? It's toxic food, and you eat sugar in 1600, and your teeth fall out, right? And when you actually have decay, you get infection, and then the infection goes into your blood system, lodges in your heart, and it kills you. So the life expectancy 1700 is like 30. The average person's living to age 30, right? And of course, today our life expectancy is almost triple. Certainly 2.5 times more in the 70s and in the 80s. And when you ask why, the answer is, well, clean water, clean air, clean food, right? The ability to purge pathogens or toxic elements from the blood, and an understanding of medicine where we don't willingly inject toxins in the blood. I need to operate on you. My hands are dirty, right? A lot of times people die because the physician introduced the infection in the surgery. Women die in childbirth because the physicians are introducing the toxins or the pathogens. And the big breakthrough in humanity was understanding, looking through the microscope and seeing that there are pathogens, below the microscope, and that's what kills you. It's not spirits. It's not you're a bad person. And of course, it doesn't help to bleed you, right? Like taking half your blood doesn't get the bacteria out of the other half. It just weakens you. So if we consider the role of money, it's liquid capital. Money is liquid capital, and if the money is toxic, if it's defective, then when it's used as liquidity, then it's basically like transfusing the patient with infected blood. And of course, when it's used as a store of value, as a treasury, it's like storing away a bunch of toxic infected food and then pulling it out, or spoiled food. You're eating rotting food or rotted food. And people haven't, there's a period in human history where no one could conceive of pathogens in the blood or toxicity in the water or the food. They just didn't have the science. And then there's an inflection point where once you realize that, the food could be bad, the water could be bad, or your blood could be infected. Once you get to that inflection point, the world opens up, and now you start thinking about health and humanity differently. I think before Satoshi, no one could conceive of toxic money because no one had ever seen non-toxic money. If you live 2 million years ago and someone says, "Whoa, you're not drinking clean water," well, none of it's clean. Right? It's like relatively clean. This is out of a river, that's out of a puddle, and that's out of a pond, but it's not like they had distilled clean water. Now, if you took a modern human being and you dropped them 1 million years ago and you said, look around, they would say, I can't drink any of this. Right? You see, so most of the things that were normalized, you wouldn't engage in. And post Satoshi, now you actually have a non-defective asset, which can be used as money, and you can also use it as property. Once you see a non-defective asset used as property, now you understand why every other company went bankrupt. And now you see why companies fail. And now you see, here's a profound idea. Most companies want to run with negative working capital. That is to say, if I have $1 billion and it's losing 10% of its value a year, I'm losing $100 million a year by holding it. What's negative working capital? Well, I borrow $1 billion.
Yeah.
And I have negative $1 billion. And if the money is losing 10% a year, I'm making $100 million. I'm paying 7% interest. I'm making 10%. So I'm actually making $30 million on the spread by having negative working capital. But the lesson we taught everybody is that capital is toxic. And of course, that's like teaching you your blood is toxic. And the solution is bleed it all out of you. Well, the capital isn't toxic. It's the flavor of asset you used as capital is toxic. And once you understand that, then you realize that the way you build a family or the way you build a company or the way you build a country is on a foundation of non-toxic capital.
So the toxic maximalists
Clean
are the
money.
least toxic people in the world. That's excellent. That's an excellent way of describing it.
That was an excellent answer to the question, and I think we'll wrap this up. So, any last words about the transitioning economies, the theme of this afternoon? Daniel, briefly.
No, I think go watch the panels, people. If you haven't caught them live, go back and watch them because it's all covered there. Michael's keynote at the last panel here as well. Preston did a great job guiding that conversation. Yeah, so I'm really happy with how it's gone. A big shout out to Andre and the whole team at Madeira. This is just such a huge event. What a place.
Yep.
Fantastic.
And we're looking forward to tomorrow. We'll be back at the same times.
Yes.
1 o'clock and 6 o'clock.
And tomorrow we have a lot to look forward to. We have a morning block on energy curated by Troy Cross, and then an afternoon block on Bitcoin relating to human rights curated by Alex Gladstein. And yes, so thank you so much for tuning in today for Bitcoin Atlantis, Day 1. Michael, Daniel, thank you for joining us for the commentary booth. And this is it for us for Day 1 of Bitcoin Atlantis.